Could Mitchell Robinson starting boost the Knicks offense just as much as their defense? We get into that and much more on today's Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are locked on to the New York Knicks, and my name is Gavin Schall. I am a New York City native. I'm a credentialed media member, has been covering the Knicks for nearly a decade now, and I'm the Saturday host of the Locked On NBA podcast, so be sure to check out all my work nationally there. This is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving the most detailed insight on your favorite team. At least we're going to go over a bunch 5 days a week, so be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. I've said it this entire week. Some announcements are going to be coming soon on future co-hosts. That's right. That was a plural, future co-hosts of Locked On Knicks, and I'm really excited to share that with you guys, so be sure you are subscribed so you never miss an episode. On today's show, for the second straight day, I am joined by XJ, the co-host of the fantastic Hot Hand Theory podcast, to continue talking through possibilities for the Knicks starting lineup, including the upside of starting Mitchell Robinson, why he might not be as bad for the Knicks spacing as you may think. Was the Josh Hart lineup last year inherently flawed, or could he actually fit as a starter under Mike Brown? And is there a world, everyone assumes it's going to be Hart, is there a world where the Knicks actually bench Mikal Bridges? We get into that all in just a sec right here on Locked On Knicks. All right, let's talk maybe the favorite to start, and that is Mitchell Robinson. I've spent a lot of time this summer talk about Mitchell Robinson potentially starting. I'll just reiterate, just in the broadest terms, minus 3.7 net rating with the starters in the playoffs last year. Again, that was only in a bit over 100 possessions, I think, in total. I probably should have double checked that before the show. But we didn't have a large sample size. It was against the best teams in the NBA. I think the Pacers were perhaps uniquely qualified to make the Knicks feel a lot of pain for that and run actions that set up both Cat and Mitch in space on the perimeter in uncomfortable positions and especially in transition to like pick on that as much as humanly possible. I think regular season teams with regular season levels of scouting and prep going into games, and also the fact that like just no one else has the Pacers personnel and system, especially with no Jason Tatum in Boston. Like I do think there aren't a lot of Eastern Conference teams that can pick on it the way that the Pacers did. And that's encouraging. The rebounding should be great. It was weirdly like not incredible in the playoffs. Like it had 100th percentile offensive rebounding rate, just a 43rd percentile defensive rebounding rate. That was, to be clear, that was with the starting five out there with Mitch and Cat. So that's maybe something to look at. I would assume that's some noise. Like I have a feeling like if you have Mitch and Cat out there together, you're going to be an amazing rebounding team on both ends of the floor. But again, I've talked a lot about it, actually. I'm really curious your take as someone who is normally about shooting, about spacing, but to your point, also about doubling down on strengths. And if you're not going to double down on the shooting strength, you might as well double down on the defense and rebounding strength. What's the case for starting Mitchell Robinson?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I think it's doubling down on the rebounding strength that you have with Mitchell Robinson. And I agree with you. I think to me, Mitchell Robinson's the favorite. I think if I had to bet right now, September 24th or whenever this is airing, I would bet on Mitchell Robinson starting game one. I think that the interesting thing, and you talked about my kind of favoritism towards spacing, I think that he doesn't hurt the offensive spacing as much as you think he would because of his vertical gravity as a lob threat, but also his gravity at the rim as an offensive rebounder. And I think it's an interesting way to think about gravity, but you think about, at least I do, I think about wanting to pull rim protectors away from the rim. And Mitch doesn't necessarily do that, but when he's standing at the rim, he serves a similar purpose as a shooter in that someone needs to stay attached to Mitchell Robinson to keep him off the board. So even if that player is at the rim, they can't necessarily protect the rim. It's such an interesting dynamic, something like what Steven Adams obviously brought to Houston as well, where you're watching these games and you're like, especially in the Warriors series, and you're like, Steven Adams is standing right next to the rim, and you're like, well, he's not able to help their spacing. But then you see Rockets players drive, and it's like they're getting layups. It's like, how are they getting layups when there's another player right next to the rim? And it's like, you can't leave Steven Adams for a second or you're done. And Mitchell Robinson is very similar in that way. So he doesn't really hurt the spacing in the ways that you think he might. And then obviously to me, just him being a lob threat, it's just a different type of dynamic than having a player like Josh Hart or a non-shooter who's a wing or a small player. It's just much different. So to me, I think in a weird way, he's like pretty, I would say like a neutral impact towards the offensive end. Mm-hmm. And obviously, you know, the best defensive Knicks center that they have on the roster. My only concerns would be, not only, but main concern, honestly, would be like durability with Mitchell Robinson. And I think even if we do make the case that Mitchell Robinson should be the starter, if someone was to make that case, and he is, you still kind of have to have a plan B, because I don't expect Mitchell Robinson to just suddenly become healthy and play 70 games, you know, this coming season. So there has to be a plan B in your back pocket, because even if that's plan A, plan B is going to come into play. And we kind of know that at this point. So it's not super exciting to me, to be honest, like some of these other options that we've talked about, but it is a rock solid, steady option. And I wouldn't have an issue with it if they went in this direction.
Yeah, I talked about it a lot with Sam Quinn. Like the defense at times is gonna be concerned just because of Cat, but I do like we saw it in Minnesota. Like you could potentially have the best defense in the league with an elite rim protector. It's to me, it's like, can Mitch do that for even, like, forget about 82 games? Can Mitch do that for 60 games? And even if he starts, like, are you closing with him? Like, is he playing a guaranteed 28 minutes a night? And if he does, like, are you finding minutes for Yabu? Are you finding minutes for OG at the 4? Like, one of the great complications with all this is Mike Brown came out today at media day and said, unless I totally misread this quote, that he's interested in playing like a 9 to 10 man rotation with all the Malcolm Brogdon and Landry Shamet stuff that we're not going to get to today, but hopefully you and I we'll have you back on. We can talk about on a future day. Like, they seem very intent on bringing both those guys in. And I don't see why Malcolm Brogdon wants to be here if he doesn't have a guaranteed spot in the rotation. And that's where all of this gets tricky. And starting Mitch gets tricky, and basically starting anyone other than Deuce gets really tricky, because then you just have too many guards off the bench. You don't really have enough minutes for everyone to play. And I don't like, the math isn't mathing. And to me, like that, our buddy Chris Persianen talked about when he was on, like, he threw up the windy fingers, right? And that's like, all right, is there a trade coming? Is maybe like, we're going to put out this episode and 2 hours later, like, one of these guys is going to be dealt. Like, it's interesting that the Knicks are bringing like Alex Len into training camp. And I think we're working out Thomas Bryant and Trey Jemison. Like, all of that is fascinating. And like, there's almost a question of like, do they intend to keep Mitchell Robinson on this team, or are they going to make a move? And is it going to be Gershon Yabusele and Ariel Hukporti and maybe another center playing those minutes? Like, I don't know if this is totally settled. It almost feels to me like a little ominously like last season, where we were having these debates of like, oh man, Dante DiVincenzo just scored 37 points in the Knicks' last game of the season. I guess he's going to come off the bench and only play 25 minutes a game. That's kind of weird, but okay. Like, they're going to be super deep. They'll make that work. So my windy fingers are up. I'm curious if this is going to be the final version of the roster, because it doesn't totally add. I mean, it literally doesn't add up in that they still have to trade a salary away to make Brogdon and Shamet work, but it also doesn't really add up from a role and from a minutes perspective. So that's where I'm very curious about all this. But purely from a basketball perspective, like, I'm with you. I think it's solid. I think they will be good. I think, like, in addition to the fact that like that net rating was accumulated again against the best teams in basketball, a significant factor there is like, this group didn't get any experience together in the regular season. And some of that's on Tim Thibodeau. Some of that's on the fact that, again, Mitch just missed the whole season. But I want to see like a full off season with them potentially working together, potentially working on this. We saw Kat and Rudy Gobert had excellent two-man chemistry in Minnesota, and you could run a big pick and roll, and you could put defenses in uncomfortable positions. There were small flashes of that in the playoffs. We didn't get a lot of it. The single biggest thing holding that back is like, man, if there was like, maybe you and I have had this conversation before, but if there was like one skill you could boost for an individual Knick, if I could give Mitch like 50% better hands, I think you could start him and the Knicks would just run away with an NBA title, right? Like, if he could catch lobs and could catch post passes and just get up and dunk it immediately, that would be such a freaking game changer for the New York Knicks. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world. My other concern, and I'll throw this back to you, is can Mike Brown do what Tom Thibodeau didn't, and still, to the best extent you can, maximize Karl Anthony Towns at the 4, right? Because we saw Minnesota I think, do that to the best of their ability. And they have a great coaching staff, right? And Tom Thibodeau, bless his heart, that was not a strength of his. And it was not something like he could even, like, I don't think any coach could figure that out on the fly with no previous time. And that was the issue when they went to that lineup last year. To me, Cat sort of felt like a filthy rich Anthony Tolliver out there in the playoffs. Like, he was just sitting there. He was moping. He was spacing. You were not taking advantage of, to your point, one of the great shot makers in the NBA to the fullest extent. And that is probably my single biggest fear having Mitch out there. It's that Cat gets minimized in a way that it just makes no sense to even be playing him, because you still have to live with his defense, even if it's at the 4, and his offense, he's not giving you what he should. All right, guys, we all know, or at least if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know, Josh Hart starting didn't really work last year for the Knicks. But was that a skill issue or a coaching issue? We debate next on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I got to say that again because it's crazy. You bet 5, that bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. That is an insane deal. My favorite part about FanDuel is I'm a New York Giants fan, and I have in turn been depressed over the last decade plus because my team has not had a quarterback. My team has not had an offensive line over that time. So if you're in a similar space and your team just flat out sucks, well, FanDuel will add a little bit more juice to your Sundays and give you that extra reason to be invested. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Totally agree. I think just from a macro standpoint, the biggest argument for bringing in Mike Brown, and Mike Brown being the Knicks' big hire, in my opinion, is that he can unlock Karl-Anthony Towns, not at the 4, but at the 5. And not just offensively in terms of his shooting, but as a passer. Along with, of course, you know, the other argument being doing for Brunson and Towns what he did for Fox and Sabonis. When the Knicks first acquired Karl-Anthony Towns, you know, I waxed poetic about his passing. It seemed to be the one thing that people hadn't talked about, something that he had not gotten credit for throughout his career, being a great passer, continually getting better as a passer, especially at his position. And I think not at the 4, but at the 5, he would have the best ample opportunity to show off his passing skill in 5-out situations. Again, bring it back to the Princeton style offense with heavy movement. The 5 has to make a lot of decisions, has to have the ball in their hands a lot from the top of the key, has to make really good reads and good passes from a high-low position and around the key. And I just think that that is a way that you will unlock Karl-Anthony Towns, not just with his shooting and spacing, but with his passing. And it doesn't really work well with Mitchell Robinson next to him. The reason why I still think, you know, my bet would be on Mitchell Robinson starting, granted, if he's a Knick, it's just that you mentioned, and you said, I think, you know, obviously in a stretch scenario, like Mitchell Robinson playing 60 games and playing 28 minutes per game, Mitchell Robinson is and maybe this is sad to say, I don't know. Mitchell Robinson will never play 28 minutes per game for the rest of his NBA career. He in fact has never played 28 minutes per game in his career. His career high is 27 and a half minutes per game in a season where he only played 31 games.
I guess I picked a good number.
You were on point, really.
Yeah.
But Mitchell Robinson is like a sub 25 minutes per game player at best in a best case scenario world. So you know, regardless of if he starts, he's not going to be playing that many minutes. There's still a boatload. We're talking 23 minutes at the minimum that needs to be covered at the 5 position. And so I think you can have that balance. Again, it doesn't excite me because you're not doubling down on strengths. You're kind of diffusing your strengths. You're saying we're going to kind of have the shooting, and we're going to have the defense, and we're going to take little mini, you know, hits in these other spaces in order to be able to have that. So it feels like something that could be stable, but not really help the Knicks maximize and reach the kind of ceiling that we want to see from them. And so while I think it can be, you know, the lineup that they run with to kind of stabilize, I don't think it's going to be one that gets played anywhere nearly as much as the Knicks starting lineup last season, but really not one of the most played starting lineups in the NBA, honestly.
Yeah, and maybe even one of the least if they truly want to go 10-man. Yeah, and play like I referenced it a couple of times, but I think the Cavs' most used lineup last year was under 600 possessions and the Knicks was 1,800. Like if you can just get closer to that, that would make a big difference. And you can do it situationally too, like in terms of starting him. Like I'd be interested to see what it looks like against the Cavs, just because, at least, again, granted, it's going to be 3 years ago by the start of this season. Like I'm curious if Evan Mobley's clearly gotten stronger. I think Jared Allen still has some issues with this. Like it feels like Mitch might be the Cavs' kryptonite. And again, I want to give those guys credit. Maybe that's changed, but I think he can be a real advantage in that matchup. And maybe that means you start him. Maybe that just means you put him in early and you play him like to the high end of that in the playoffs. And he's playing 26 minutes a game in the playoffs just because they have no answer for him. And the good thing with Mike Brown is I think the Knicks should presumably have the flexibility to do that and adjust for matchup, and also have actually used the regular season, like you and I always advocate, as like practice and as prep for the playoffs, and say, oh, we can pull this out in a pinch because this lineup played 400 possessions together during the season instead of they played 20 possessions together during the season. We have no idea what it actually looks like, what the strengths and weaknesses are, and how to best structure it and how to best organize it. So with that, we will conclude with last year's starter. And maybe the guy at the end of the day, we're overthinking all this, and Mike Brown will be like, no, Tibbs was just stupid and he didn't do this the right way. I'm going to do this the right way. And that is, of course, Josh Hart. He was not good with the starters last year. Minus 3.6 net rating on the season. XJ, it's a tale as old as time. We said it a million times. They were very good. Then teams adjusted how they guarded them. They started putting a big on Josh Hart. All of a sudden, it was not so good. You kind of lost the benefits of cat spacing on one end. And Josh, I think, though, he was elite as a rebounder after just a torrid start to the year where he was having like one of the more efficient seasons of his career. In fact, he went up from the previous season 19th percentile in terms of points per shot attempt to 84th percentile in points per shot attempt. His effective field goal percentage was up over 8%. He was much better at the rim. Part of it was the shift in how defenses guarded him. Part of it was the runner's knee that was like much reported and just seemed like an overwork exhaustion injury for him. It seems abundantly clear, to me at least, that Josh is probably better in a smaller role. That, as we saw in his first season as a Knick, is just incredibly impactful coming off the bench. Another factor here that we just heard today, that's good timing for this episode. Apparently, he hurt his finger or re-injured his finger after hurting in the playoffs over the summer and will be playing with a splint, which, let me be the first to say, with the Knicks depth, and I talk about this all the time, I wish he would just go and get it fixed and get surgery on it and make sure it's 100% and be fine for the season. Apparently, instead, he's going to do it. He's still, you could take the Tom Thibodeau out the team, but you can't take it out to Josh Hart. I don't know if that works, but that's what I'm going with. He's going to play through it. He's going to lead into the Tibbs way. So we'll see how that, but I assume that cannot be good for shooting, even if it is on his offhand. I've been talking for a while. I will cede the floor to you. What do you think about the idea of Josh Hart starting? And what do you think is the possibility of like it just being as simple as like a more creative offensive coach can figure it out and make that work, if that is going to be your starting lineup?
Whew, a lot there. Josh Hart in a Mike Brown offense, to me, is a better fit in the starting lineup, I'll say. Josh Hart is clearly a very strong passer and creator, such a multi-talented player. And like we've talked about repeatedly, Brown's offense works really well when everybody can pass and move well off the ball and make quick decisions. And Hart would really help with the fluidity of the offense. He can make all the types of passes as necessary. But of course, the obvious case, like you said, everyone in the world knows by now, his shooting makes him a particular liability at the wing because he doesn't generate vertical gravity or gravity at the rim like a guy like Mitchell Robinson does. And you can put the big on him and still protect the rim. It's just such a insidious problem to have, like, honestly. And I don't know that you can come up with fixes for it. Every Knicks analyst in the world, every NBA analyst, every coach on ESPN has tried to come up with ways to solve for this math problem of Josh Hart being a non-shooter on the wing. And while there are things you can do to offset it, it doesn't catapult the Knicks to their best and most efficient and peak form. And that's what we're looking for at the end of the day when you're trying to pursue a title, and the Knicks should be clearly trying to pursue a title this season. You need to get to your peak form. You need to get to your ceiling version of what you can be. And I just don't really see a way they can be that with Josh Hart in the starting lineup. I think they can be really good. I think they can be better than they were last year with some different dynamics and more movement and more activity, and using him in multiple ways where teams can't just key in on him and use him and exploit him offensively. But at the same time, I don't see you know, when you mentioned the math not mathing. I think the other factor here is that Josh Hart, in terms of being in his role, he is one of three genuine wings the Knicks have on their roster. The Knicks are loaded up with guards, and it would be really strange to me to have a roster full of guards and start all three of the only wings that you have, and then have a hodgepodge of all these guards playing together or trying to kind of like mix and match by pulling some of those wings early, especially if there's no really, really clear advantage to doing so. So to me, I just don't see it from the standpoint of the Knicks reaching their ceiling. I don't see it from the standpoint of making their rotation work. If they want to do a 10-man rotation, how are you managing Jordan Clarkson and Malcolm Brogdon, Deuce McBride all off the bench is very strange to me. So yeah, and if you're going to play Landry Shamet even, so I don't know, it feels really difficult to play. Again, I think it can be a good lineup. I think it could be better than it was last year, but we saw hundreds of possessions of these guys all together, and while it was in a limited capacity in terms of the deployment that Tips was using, I don't think the ceiling for that lineup is as high as would necessitate going in that direction. So I will say right now, and I'm fine with looking back and being like, oh, I didn't know what I was talking about. I'd be surprised if Josh Hart was the fifth starter for the Knicks.
All right, guys, everyone having this conversation just sort of assumes Josh Hart is going to be the odd man out in the Knicks starting lineup. But what if it was actually Mikal Bridges? Is that crazy? We talk about it next on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about some new old friends over at Locked On Knicks, and that is our friends over at Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I got to say I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family. I ultimately had to give them a try. Let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear as someone who plays a lot of sports, does a lot of walking, fit, comfort, or just finding the right style for me. Skims changed all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Guys, at the end of the day, I really tried the Skims cotton brief, and I tried it at a very high stakes moment, right? Mine came in the mail just before I went to Hawaii this summer, and I had plans to propose in Hawaii this summer on top of a 10,000 foot volcano, which I was then going to bike down. So I needed sturdy underwear to hold up through that entire journey. And after trying them, I am absolutely hooked. They did so incredibly well on the day. I felt supported at a time I needed it the most. They move with me, they never lose their shape, and they stay in place all day long, whether I'm working out or I'm just around the area running errands. They're the most comfortable and reliable underwear I've ever owned. Plus, the lightweight material feels amazing. It's almost like you're wearing nothing at all. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select my show, again, Locked On Knicks, in the drop-down menu that follows. Thanks so much, and be sure to check out Skims. Yeah, I think I would as well. And I think, to your point, not only just from like a position standpoint, do you need him on the bench? I think his creation is needed on the bench. And look, you've solved some of that, right? Jordan Clarkson, Malcolm Brogdon, just obviously both like a small to potentially dramatic step up over what campaign. God bless him. He was awesome for the Knicks last year. Those guys are better, and those guys will create more shots. And Clarkson in particular, I'm really excited to see like what he could bring, just like a cross-court live dribble passer. Like, not that he's elite at that, but like compared to what the Knicks had in as a bench option, he is quite good. I think Brogdon like had elite assist rates. It was something like 94th percentile 2 years ago, 86th percentile, 85th percentile last season. Like, both those guys are solid passers, but you can really like juice that up even further having Josh Hart with them, right? 90th percentile assist rate last year, even more impressively, 98th percentile assist to usage ratio. Like, he was an extraordinarily good creator for someone who, to your point, does not have like any off-ball gravity and like not a ton of on-ball gravity either, because he's not really a threat as a pull-up shooter, and yet he still found ways to create quality shots for people who will always bring that. It's why you can see it if you squint, like how Mike Brown could make this work with the starting lineup. I would be really excited to just load the bench up with playmaking. I think it'll bring back something the Knicks had early in the Tom Thibodeau tenure where you are just dominating your bench minutes. And I think Josh Hart is going to be the ringleader in that, playing next to Clarkson, Brogdon, potentially Mitch, Yabu for some of those minutes. Like, that is a deadly, deadly, deadly group that could help, at least in the regular season, elevate the Knicks to elite status and will win you those non-Brunson minutes in the playoffs that have been so hard for the Knicks to win and control in the past. Final thing before I let you go, and I've kept you for a long time, so it could just be a really quick hitter. This is not going to happen for political reasons, and because I think Mike Brown put in a lot of work sort of winning Mikal Bridges back after he might have been a little disgruntled with how last season went. Is there any world, if you were running the Knicks, where you would not start Mikal Bridges? And maybe I'm putting too much weight there just on that very small sample size of the starters, with Deucin for Mikal being the second best lineup in basketball. But I do think there is some middle ground value there where you get Deuce's shooting, but you still have Josh Hart's rebounding. And maybe the single biggest reason that one works to me, just in contrast to what Mikal brought to the table, is just the above the break 3-point shooting disappearing for Mikal Bridges last year. And you weren't really getting all that much value from him there relative to Josh Hart. Obviously, he was just more respected as a shooter and he was treated like more of a shooter, but he did not shoot well from above the break. And maybe an offseason to not have whatever that funky hitch was in his form. Maybe that'll be fixed. Maybe he'll be back to being a very good shooter from there, and you'll just want to play 5 out, and that'll make more sense. But I think the difference in physicality between Josh and Mikal, like, is a very real thing. And as much as, like, you and I have knocked Josh and said that's the issue, like, Mikal's flaws are also a big part of why that starting lineup ultimately didn't work last year.
Yeah, that's a totally fair point. And you know, to the point of his shot, he's always talked about that he's continuously fine-tuning his shot since college. So maybe this next adjustment will allow him to shoot from further than 23 feet away from the basket.
It could be even worse this year.
Yeah, who knows?
He's like, yeah, all underhand this year, baby.
So Rick Barry, Mikal Bridges will I think you make a really good point, an interesting point, but to me, and it's going to be funny to hear me say that, it's a little overthinking to me. And
wow. That is the biggest compliment I could get from you.
I was going to say that this should hurt the most from me telling someone else that they're overthinking is saying something. No, I just think Mikal is just too talented. I think he's just too good. I just think he's too good. I don't think he was deployed in the right way last year, especially on the defensive end. And I don't think we saw the best from him. And I think if you put him next to, if you put him next to a Deuce McBride, it just solves everything. It just solves everything. It puts him in his correct position defensively and in a role where he can really excel. It allows him to, fill up the corners and not have to shoot from above the break and not really have to deal with that. He allows him to be able to make back cuts to the basket and play off of Karl Anthony Towns a little bit more. Like, it just solves kind of everything. And I think you can fix a lot of what we saw from Mikal Bridges just by fixing the stuff around him. But I think just as a player, he's too talented. I just don't think, again, and we're talking about ceiling. Yeah, maybe you could do a little better for a little while in certain lineups where Bridges is on the bench and it's Josh Hart and it's Deuce McBride instead. But like, when we're talking about hitting the peak of what the Knicks can be, you will have to have Mikal Bridges out there, and he will have to be playing at a high level. So to me, knowing that at the end of the day, if I'm seeing the Knicks win a championship and raise up a Larry O'Brien trophy, that entails Mikal Bridges being really good and playing a lot of minutes and playing in the starting lineup. So you got to figure out how to make that work. And that's my opinion. Maybe I'm underthinking it for the first time in my life, but yeah, I wouldn't remove Mikal Bridges from the starting lineup.
No, I think you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, you talked me down from the ledge. I'm gonna go talk to my I went too galaxy brain. It happened. I was flush with power, man. I'm like, look at us. We're gonna have Jalen Brunson and Cat coming off the bench by the end of this conversation.
Yeah.
XJ, this is a pleasure as always, man. Can you please tell everyone where they could? We always get comments saying, like, when you're on, like, man, this guy's great. Like, where can I find him? Like, where can people find more of your great work?
That's really kind for the commenters. Love being on Locked On Knicks. Always love being here with you, Gavin. We have some of the best conversations. And if you appreciate how we've talked in this conversation here, you can find me at Hot Hand Theory on YouTube. That's the main place. My co-host Jeff and I have really deep dive conversations about the Knicks, but about all teams in the NBA. And we are going to be coming back very soon with podcasts, streaming, video essays, a lot of different types of content. So excited to see you all there if you want to come check us out.
It is, to your guys' credit, it is a very specific niche you're filling with the hot hand theory. And it's like an itch this whole summer. I haven't gotten scratched because you guys have understandably took some time off after a long grind. You both have full-time jobs, but I am incredibly excited for that to be back in my life. And I'm excited to hear it. So just as a fan, I cannot wait. I'm sure everyone listening cannot wait. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks, XJ specifically, and all of us. And yeah, we'll be back in a little bit here for more Locked On Knicks.